Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Hannah Elliott.
And I'm Matt Miller. This is Hot Pursuit. Coming up, we have a special edition live from Miami with Susie Wolff. She's got a new book out. It's called Driven.
It's called very fittingly called Driven.
Yes.
She's also the head of F1 Academy.
The head of F1 Academy.
She's the real deal.
A lot of experience in Formula E, and obviously she lives, eats, sleeps, and breathes racing. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I know. I've started reading her book. I love how she actually says she's kind of insecure about how thick her neck is.
What?
From racing. Like, it's kind of cool. Isn't that kind of cool?
That is cool. I've always been a little bit insecure about how thin my neck is.
Well, there's something we can relate to her with.
We're also going to give you a piece of Hannah's interview with Cadillac team principal Dan Towriss.
Yes.
Here at the Bloomberg House in Miami. And this is a cool thing that we did. Bloomberg, obviously a financial news organization, did a dedicated building in Davos where the masters of the universe fly their private jets into Switzerland for a big power week. It was so successful that we decided we needed to do one in the U.S., and we chose Miami.
I kind of love it. And also, we were asked earlier, what's the growth platform of F1? I think the fact that Bloomberg House is in Miami is a pretty good testament. We want to be where the power players are.
Yeah,
they're here.
It's already Miami, known as Wall Street South. So
there you go.
Ever since Ken Griffin brought Citadel down here, and New York and California raised taxes on everybody, the richest people in America have been pouring down here. So we're covering it as closely as we can, and happy that we see so many. I saw yesterday more than one baby blue Lamborghini Urus.
Love.
Yeah,
How'd it look?
I mean, a little embarrassing, I think, but I know you love that truck.
I do. I think it's the superior version of the SUV. I saw a Bugatti Chiron.
Oh, really?
This morning.
Very
at
nice.
A hotel. It was beautiful.
I saw a Rolls-Royce Cullinan drive by me one way, and then a drop head drive by the other way. And then I looked over at an Aston Martin olive green Vanquish on the street, and my buddy that I was walking with said, "Oh, that's my car." And I said, "How did you choose the color?" And he said, "Same as my yacht."
Well, of course.
Of course.
As you do. Makes perfect sense.
So a lot coming up on the F1 world with Susie Wolff. We also managed to wrangle an interview with Fernando Alonso.
This is a big get, Matt.
It is a big deal for me, especially because people of a certain age remember his championship days in F1. He's obviously, he's not even as old as me. He's only 44.
No, he's a young thing.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's raced in IndyCar, and there's a lot of talk about him at Le Mans.
And he's a nice guy. He's quite a gentleman, too.
Yeah, so I'm very much looking forward. Plus, he looks like Dave Grohl. You know?
Well, that's something we need to talk about.
And I love the Foo Fighters. Was a big Nirvana fan back in the day. So looking forward to...
I'm a big Courtney fan, so we may, of course. We're going to be on different sides of the same coin on that one.
But remember, he's not Dave Grohl.
Okay,
He is Fernando Alonso. Let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Susie Wolff.
Susie, it is I echo Matt's sentiments. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you here. And it's also just really fun because I feel like we can talk to you about any number of things and go any direction. But I want to start with your book, just because that is front of mind for me. I've started reading it. It's called Driven. It's fabulous. You're also going to be speaking about it tonight at the Fillmore, we should say, in conjunction with Live Nation. So anyone who wants to also attend that, I think, can Google it, search it. But I've read comments in the media where you kind of said you never thought you would write a memoir. And I'm curious why you, in all of your history and everything you've done, thought that you wouldn't write a book about your own life.
Well, firstly, hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I've just arrived in Miami. Thank you to Bloomberg for hosting me. And it's such an exciting week to be in Miami. I love the Miami Grand Prix, even though the F1 Academy is not racing this weekend. And yes, here, predominantly because Driven, my book, launched in the US just on Tuesday. And it's such a funny question that you ask, because I guess I have so much on my plate with other things that I thought, writing a book is a lot of work, so I didn't really see myself having the capacity. But the background story at the end of 2024, when we were just trying to get the momentum around F1 Academy, and For those of you that don't know what it is, it's a race series for young women, because we're trying to challenge the preconception that it's still a man's world, that it's macho. And I had this idea that it would be great to have a children's book of a little girl that raced, that parents could read to their daughters, that helped change the mindset shift of who belongs in racing. And I went to meet the six big publishers in London, and all of them had the same feedback for me. Well, we can do a children's book, but first you need to write your book. And at the time I thought I have zero capacity to write a book, but I went home to Scotland for Netflix filming, of all things, for Drive to Survive. And I was sitting with my brother, who's a film director. He's the creative one in the family. And we were catching up, and I said, I went to meet some publishing houses, and they said I should write a book. And he said, that's super interesting. If you would write a book, and how could it look, and the stories. And I suddenly sat there and thought, I will write a book, and I'm going to do it together with you. So I wrote the book together with my brother. Way more work than I anticipated.
Yes.
And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so 9 drafts later, my publisher eventually said, it's done. This is the final version. Now we need to get the book out. But it feels like with the cultural shift happening in F1, 42% of the global fan base is now female. The fastest growing fan demographic is the 18 to 24-year-old female. It felt like the right time to tell the story, because the sport that I competed in 2015, 2014, it's very different to the sport we see now. And that's something which I think F1 should take credit for, because they put a lot of investment into F1 Academy. And we've just seen this big shift where we just have such a strong female fan base that also makes good business for us to connect with.
I wonder, we always talk to big CEOs and we've interviewed Toto, for example, on our podcast, team, principals, and I'm always interested in where you came from. And you have, I think, an especially interesting story in the Stoddard family and a motorcycle dealership in Scotland. It sounds so much fun. And also only in Great Britain do you have these mothers that are caning their children down the ski slopes, and encouraging them to do these extreme sports. And, if you fall down, get up, walk it off, you're going to be fine. Tell us about how you grew up and what made you want to pursue a career in racing and a career in this sport.
You're not painting a very good light on my mother here.
She's a real badass.
I think it's awesome. It sounds great.
I actually want to read about her life as well, I should say.
Well, when I look back, how many of you in the audience have children? I don't want to say you look old, so maybe you have children, but okay, that's good. I think when I look back at my childhood, you're right, I had a mother. My mum met my dad when she bought her first motorbike from his shop. She used to race quads. So I grew up seeing a mother who was equal to my father. She ran her own business. And I have a brother who's only 15 months older than me. So where I'm so thankful when I look back, my parents never differentiated between son and daughter. It was never that my brother should get a motorbike and I should go off and play with a horse or with Barbie. I wanted a motorbike too. I got one. He raced. If I wanted to race, I raced. And a lot of people presume I was a little tomboy, but I loved Barbie. I loved pink. But I also loved racing, and they very much brought me up in an environment where I never once thought I was doing anything unusual for a girl. And the great thing about my sport is you wear a helmet. So actually when you're out on track, you don't see who your competitors are. And the great thing about sport is it's so pure. The result sheets count. So it didn't matter that I was the only girl out there. What mattered was how fast I was and if I was going to be able to compete at the front. But that environment that I grew up with, this toughness of you fall down, well, you dust yourself off and you pick yourself back up. And I'm so thankful I got that tenacity, because that definitely was probably the most important trait while I was racing. And I've realized in the world of business, it's also been a great tool.
I wanted to ask about that. It seemed very normalized in your family that you would do everything, of course, that your brother did, but also that your parents did, whether it was skiing or swimming, motorbikes, karting. How important do you think it was for becoming who you are today that all of that was normalized across the board and there were no exceptions? And did you ever find a moment where you actually wished your parents might have actually carved out a little of a safety net for you? Did it ever feel that, this is too much?
It never did, because they never pushed us. It was very much, there are the possibilities. If you work hard, you can be successful, and we're here to catch you if you ever fall. And even to this day, I'm here in Miami with Toto. We've been in New York. It's my parents who are looking after my son. So they've really been such a support network. And without a doubt, I wouldn't be who I am today and where I am today without that foundation of love and support. And that environment that very much gave me that ambition and drive to say, well, I want to achieve, and there's no reason why I can't achieve if I work hard enough. And so I definitely think our childhood plays such a big part in who we become, and also that they exposed me to the world of racing and what was possible. Because when I raced karts, I was racing at an international level, but as a youngster, you're not really thinking about the future or your career. But they took me to watch a Formula 3 race when I was 13. There was a young English driver called Jenson Button who won on that day, of course. He went on to be pretty successful. But that's when I suddenly thought, I want to be a racing driver. I want to try and make it to Formula 1. And I had all these pictures on my wall of F1 drivers. Clearly they were all men. But I look back at that little girl and I think to myself, did you not realise there was no other woman racing? And I didn't. It never once really occurred to me that I was the only woman. And of course, as my career progressed and the media attention around my success and my journey increased, it became so much about me being a woman. But I was just out there to be the best racing driver I could be. But suddenly the bigger story was the fact that I was a woman.
By the way, we've had Jensen on our podcast as well,
yes.
in case you're
nice
wondering.
Guy.
Woman or man, I think I would be scared because you're driving. I mean, no one ever talks about this, right? Because we all watch racing and we're all involved to some extent in this story, but it is dangerous. You're driving very fast, and if you want to win, you have to be willing to make certain sacrifices with your safety, right? Have you never thought, like, especially like after you got married and had a kid, like maybe, I shouldn't be driving this quickly?
Well, I became a mother after I stopped racing, and I'm definitely glad I did it in that order because I think that would be tough. I never once worried or had fear. I mean, I think people presume racing drivers are really, risk takers, but it's always calculated risk. We always know where the limit is. Clearly, to get onto pole position and be at the front, you need to be on the very edge of what's possible in a racing car. But I think it's more getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, because pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, getting to that stage, whether you're in a racing car or any other point in your life, that's where you kind of, the rewards are the biggest. And there was many points in my racing career, now my business career, where I threw myself in the deep end. It was uncomfortable, but I knew that was the moment where I would develop and grow the most. And I think as a racing driver, you never once actually think, oh, this is dangerous, because you're pushing for all the marginal gains out on track. And we're very lucky, and we don't take this for granted, that the sport is so much more safe now than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And touch wood, we don't see fatal accidents nearly as often as in the past. So I think the sport, from a safety perspective, has also moved on.
Are you a big risk taker in other parts of your life too? Like in business or in investing, are you willing to take big risks?
I'm only willing to take big risks if I can cope with the worst case outcome. And I always calculate what the worst case outcome is. So I'm very decisive and I'm happy to take risks, but only if I can cope with what the worst case scenario would be.
I did want to ask about that too, and this kind of hinges on that question, the idea of control. Because when you start the book, you set us, we're in the car with you, the F1 car, you're doing the laps, and you kind of are saying the only thing I can't control is the weather. The only thing I can't. Good thing the Brits and the Scots are good in the wet. And it made me think, are you a control freak? And is that bad? Is that good? And actually, how does that translate into your success in your career off the track as well?
I don't think I'm a control freak, but I like to control the controllables. Because I feel that in those moments of high pressure, it comes down to preparation. I always like to put myself in the best possible position for success, which means the hard work and the preparation in the background, that's me. There's nothing I haven't thought of. And I'm meticulous and I'm very disciplined, which drives my husband mad sometimes.
But isn't he the same? Wouldn't he be the same?
He is the same, but I always say, there's East Coast time, there's European time, and then there's Toto time. And it's always 10 minutes after the hour. He can never get somewhere on time, despite being Austrian and quite meticulous. But I think that was just who I was always. It was in my character. So clearly being in a sport where it's all about precision, it probably got worse the longer I was in racing. And of course, Formula One, everything is down to the last detail. That's why I love the environment so much, but it probably didn't help my OCD.
Now let's get back to our chat with Susie Wolff, the head of F1 Academy, and who just has a new book out, Driven.
I want to ask a little bit about control in driving and about the current formula and regulations, because I'm a bad driver on track, and I know that because
you're like a man admitting he's a bad driver.
Well,
that is so unusual.
Fair.
I respect you for that.
I feel like I know intuitively I should always be either on the gas or on the brakes, right? I want to be controlling the load. And there shouldn't be a point where I'm lifting and coasting, right? Which is what I do.
So you've got the theory correct.
But now there are drivers who say they have to do that too much, especially in qualifying. They have to stop and harvest the energy, and I just wonder, what is your take on that? Because you worked so long in Formula E, and that is really an energy management exercise, right? But usually Formula One is like a limit driver exercise, and now it's become resource management as well.
It's a difficult one. I think people have varying opinions. I'm obviously in a situation now where I run a race series. So for me, fundamentally, it's about creating exciting racing. You need cars being able to overtake. You need to see an exciting race. And I think Formula One in the past was exciting to watch. There's some races, obviously, where we get unlucky and there's not a lot of action.
There's Monaco.
There's Monaco, terrible, exactly. But I also think it's about the challenge. And clearly this is a new challenge for the drivers. I think it's interesting that the drivers that are complaining, I mean, you go down the grid of results and they get...
Are we going to name names?
The complaints get louder the further down the grid you go. But I understand, people are sometimes resistant to change, and this is a big change. But the world is changing. Electrification is part of where we are in the automotive industry, and we as a sport need to reflect that. So I think what's happened now is there's been a small tweak to the regulations for this weekend. But I think we will find our rhythm. I think fundamentally, as long as the racing is great, the drivers will get used to it. And there's definitely no way that the cars are easier to drive than in the past. It's probably much more mentally taxing for the drivers to do energy management and have that to manage alongside putting a quick lap in. But I certainly enjoy seeing just how much action there is out on track now. And that might create more action at Monaco.
It doesn't seem like artificial passing is enabled by this sort of yo-yo boost use. And then, of course, it's dangerous, right? If you have this super clipping where Ollie Behrman has to avoid Colapinto and slam into a wall.
I think with the lifting and coasting, I mean, it's still an ultimate lap time. So whoever does it best will be the quickest driver. But I think that is the new challenge within the sport. And before we had DRS, but that was also an artificial tool to overtake. We have the limitations of the tyres, which stop a driver pushing. So I think there will always be factors that will be the limitation to a driver getting the ultimate lap time, but it's still going to be the driver that copes best within a set of regulations that will be world champion at the end of the year, and it's best man and best machine. Hopefully one day best woman.
Yeah, this is perfect. This is a perfect segue, because we should talk about F1 Academy and what you talk about change, you talk about progress. What are you seeing that indicate, okay, we're getting some traction with this, we're moving forward, we're evolving, we're advancing? Give us an overview of what you see where we are now.
So how many of you have heard of F1 Academy? That's pretty good. That's encouraging. I think we've seen this big shift culturally in the sport, where there's just so much more female interest in motorsport, which I love to see, because I was a little girl that loved racing, and I don't think there's any reason why women shouldn't embrace and enjoy the sport. And I have to give a lot of credit to F1 because it recognised this growing female fan base. It gave F1 Academy the platform, and all the investment we needed to get up and running and create positive impact to see more women entering the sport. And I knew for it to be successful long term, it had to make business sense. And we're in the situation now where commercially there's a great return on investment. There are so many female-focused brands that want to come into this space, that want to activate, that want to talk to the fan base. And that's what's given us such a strong foundation, because the change will take time, but we've created this really strong impact in such a short space of time that's allowed us to see a lot of momentum.
What about the drivers themselves? How are you personally tracking and charting their progress? And even, I don't want to use the word coaching, but are you personally involved in helping them advance and refine their skills?
The great thing is we have a database of all female competitors worldwide that are competing, because in F1 Academy, we always want to have the best 18 drivers. There's a high financial barrier to entry, and in F1 Academy, we fund over 80% of every driver, which means it's a huge opportunity for any given young driver. And for us, it's to make sure that we have the best 18 in any given season. And we have a great team. We have a talent development manager that's only looking to make sure that these drivers are given the right support. We have the 5 best junior teams who also compete in F2 and F3, have created F1 world champions in their junior years. So we have definitely put an environment in place where talent can excel and that talent can be nurtured. Will then be us taking our champion and the most talented and making sure that she can rise up through the sport and on the way to Formula One.
Do you think if you had had that when you were younger, you may have gone even further down the road in your own career?
I never really look back and wonder. I definitely see the sports in a much better place now than it was when I competed. But I mean, 3 years ago, we were here with F1 Academy, and after the race, which was 2 hours before the Formula One, the driver who had won the race, she was waiting to go on the podium, and I stood next to Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of F1, and she had a kind of tear in her eye, and she said, I just can't believe I'm about to go and stand on a podium at the Miami Grand Prix. And Stefano and I looked at each other and had a real sense of pride, because I suddenly thought, imagine an 18-year-old female driver, she had the race suit of an F1 team on, going to stand on a podium at the Miami Grand Prix. I could only have dreamed of that opportunity when I was a young driver, but I also felt such a sense of pride that we've come so far in the sport that was possible.
By the way, I think, there are a lot of people who maybe chauvinists who will say, like, women aren't strong enough, to compete with men in car racing and also in motorbikes. Hannah and I have been following, and I actually met this racer, Kayla Yakov.
Yes.
She's a motorcycle
Incredible.
racer. She recently was the first woman to podium at the Daytona 200, which is a grueling event. And she recently was the first woman to win pole position in a Moto America race. And she's a tiny little thing, right? But she's amazing. How long do you think it's going to be until we start to see women taking podiums, winning races in, MotoGP, in F1? Because clearly there's no physical, hindrance that would stop them. Clearly they can and should be able to compete. So how long until we actually see it, start seeing it?
It's really interesting, the word you used, she's tiny. The great thing about motorsport is it doesn't come down to your size and your muscle mass or your muscle power, because the smaller and more compact you are, the more of an advantage it is. And that's why motorsport is one of the few sports alongside sailing and horse riding or jumping where men can compete with women. Because I'm the first to admit I can't take on a man in a 100-meter race because he has 30% more muscle than me. But I don't believe this sport comes down to pure power. And if you look at the current F1 drivers, Lando Norris, Kimi Antonelli, they're tiny. Yeah. So I think physically, there's no reason why a woman can't compete in MotoGP or in Formula One. In Formula One, you have power steering. It doesn't even take a lot of strength to turn the wheel. It's G-force, which is the most challenging. But we had Dorian Pain, our F1 Academy champion, drive a Mercedes F1 car for the first time last week. 68 laps, wow. No issue physically. So we do still have that undercurrent of chauvinistic opinions in the paddock that say, women. But I think the shift is happening, and the more talent we get entering, the more chance we have of the best competing at the very top.
But it's like 3 years, 4 years, 5.
You want to nail me down here, right? I would like to think, I always feel bad when I say the next 5 to 10 years, because I think for the young girls competing now, they think, well, I don't believe that they're capable, which I don't want to say, but I do think we're on the right trajectory, and within 5 to 8 years, it's, I think, going to happen.
That's our chat with Susie Wolff. Such a great person and conversationalist. And I love actually learning more about her family life growing up in Scotland.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Her parents own
Yes.
a motorcycle dealership. Let's get a little bit of Hannah's conversation with Dan Towriss, team principal at Cadillac.
Let's talk about Miami. I mean, it feels like all eyes are on Miami right now. We've had a bit of a lull in the racing action. This is kind of Cadillac's home field. This feels like very much a debut. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about the race going into the weekend and what it means for Cadillac to be here.
Yeah, I mean, there has been this lull in Formula One. We didn't race in April, and so everyone's been preparing for this moment. So it kind of almost puts the Miami race in a different posture. We're back racing again. It's so important, and this is such an important race. But for Cadillac, this is our first time to race on U.S. soil. New team, first race in the U.S. We couldn't be more excited about that. With chance to continue to connect with U.S. fans and then show them what the new Cadillac Formula One team looks like.
Tell me a little bit about the fan activation you've got going on. You mentioned it. I know it's a huge deal. I think it's free for everybody. Yep. How did this concept come up? Why is it so important for Cadillac to have something that is free and accessible to everyone in the city this weekend?
Yeah, with all the excitement around Formula One, we want to make sure that it's the entertainment's accessible. That building communities, as we think about how do we grow Formula One, how do we grow the fan base in the U.S., how do we grow the fan base for Cadillac, and it really starts with building community around that. And so giving people access to the team to see what Cadillac's about, access to the drivers.
Are the drivers going to be there at some point?
They might.
Okay.
They might.
I mean, if you want to say any dates or times, you can let us know.
Yeah. So it's, but yeah, it's really exciting to be able to do that, here in Miami, and everything that Cadillac is doing as well. It's just, it's an exciting activation for us.
So, that old saying, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, or win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Is that true? Is that kind of what you're getting at? That like all of this feeds into selling Cadillac cars necessarily? Or is this more about the motorsport?
This is really about the motorsport. I mean, we're building a fan base for Cadillac Formula One.
Racing.
For the Formula One team. Obviously, if we do a great job of that, I think it will impact, the auto brand, the car brand, and sell cars. But that's not the goal of the team. The goal of the team is to perform on Sunday, and we want to build a fan base at the same time we're doing that.
So on the other end, also Miami is a very expensive, glamorous, very sexy place to be. What is Cadillac doing to also tap into that type of person who wants to come here and have a really major weekend?
Yeah, so we have exclusive parties and special dinner set up throughout the weekend. A big event tomorrow night, and so really for us, we want to check all the boxes. We want to be able to provide that premium elite experience, the VVIP experience, but at the same time, have that accessibility that builds community in the fan base.
And we talked a little bit upstairs about your drivers. You really have, between Valtteri and Checo, these are kind of the two best personalities in racing, maybe. Tell us a little bit about how they provide value. Obviously, they're driving on the track, but what's the value that they provide off the track? It's kind of like an odd couple in a way.
It really is. Their personalities are so different. Valtteri's dry and kind of crazy, and some of the stunts and things that he does. They're both, but it really starts with they're both, absolutely dead serious about racing. They are here to race, and it was their experience in the car, that drove our choice, to choose them. it was at the British Grand Prix a year ago when it rained. And I say that thinking like we don't know what the forecast looks like for this weekend.
Can't control the weather. Yeah.
And you just saw experience rise to the top. The young guys struggled with how much rain was on track. And it really just showed us the value of experience in Formula One. And so having those two alongside, but it really is an odd couple, type. And we put them in a lot of different situations. They've had to eat hot wings and
who won in the hot wings test?
Not the one you would expect.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and again, Valtteri just went all in. He was taking the biggest bites, and I think from what I hear, he suffered on the way home.
I'm not going to ask for more details on that. So that's great because, sometimes we hear about all these young drivers doing really well on track. And of course, that is also true. But it's nice to know that there is something to be said for experience, for more of a veteran mentality. And also Sergio, of course, has a huge fan base in Mexico and beyond. I have to imagine that's a big growth market that you see for Cadillac. Is that true? And are there other ones that you're identifying too?
Yeah, absolutely. Checo has a huge fan base. They stop us, all over the world in places you wouldn't expect, which is, just absolutely fantastic. Because at the end of the day, you love the passion.
Is that what it is? Is that why he's so? It's just the passion.
Well, it's what he means to Mexico, what he means to the Mexican people, and so they love to support Checo and, wherever he's at. And so, that certainly is huge from that community standpoint. But the fact that the drivers have a following is, again, is part of starting that fan base. Everything with Cadillac Formula One team is starting, from the ground up. And so continuing to build the fan base with, with what we have with Checo and Valtteri is a huge compliment to the team. But again, the reason we picked them is, we're building a team. We brought a lot of experienced people in that are racing the car for the first time. And so you need like a quarterback of sorts that's helping to gel the team, the feedback, developing the car, and working as a singular unit in Formula One. And just the progress, the change, the development that I've seen from Melbourne through Suzuka has just been impressive and been very happy with how the team has progressed. We now have a month off, so we have to see what's going to happen in Miami. The team's been working really hard. Like a lot of other teams, we've got big updates that are coming, that are going to be on the car. And so we'll see how it shakes out over the weekend.
Well, I was going to ask this later, but I'll ask it now because we're kind of going there. Obviously, we've seen the news about General Motors making engines for you guys in 2029, which I don't know if saying it's a gamble is too big of a word, but that there could be more changes coming in the next few years after that. But it seems like it's very important for you and for the team to have an American beating heart in that car, basically. Why is that so essential, especially because it's a huge investment and you might have to change it again?
I mean, this team was really founded out of national pride, that the U.S. have a seat at the table, and that meant all the way across the board. We want to create pathways for American drivers. That doesn't mean that there's earmarked seats for Americans, but we want to make sure that there's a clear pathway for that. We want to have the American-built, design-built power unit in the car as well. And so we're going to have the U.S. headquarters in Indianapolis, and power units are going to be built in Charlotte. We'll have some 600,000 square feet of manufacturing space under roof. There's a huge commitment to infrastructure. And then we're talking about, how do we develop talent? Partnerships with universities and things to develop Formula One talent in the U.S. so that in the future it's a place to be. And so we're looking to redefine what it means to be an American team in Formula One.
That is really exciting to hear that you are building an ecosystem here. And it's not just about having a brand on a car. This is a from the ground up ecosystem. I'll ask the same question Matt asked Susie earlier. How many years in advance are we looking before we might expect to see an American driver on this American team?
Well, look, we're going to have an American driver racing in F2 this weekend, Colton Herta, who's been a winner in IndyCar. And Colton has shown really strong aptitude for Formula One. He's learning tracks and tires and going through the process. And so there's someone in the wings. There's a long list of development drivers who have potential as well. So it could be soon, but who knows? A Formula One seat has to be earned. It's never given.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear. I know you played baseball in your past. You really have a wide sporting history. And of course, TWG has oversight over a lot of different sporting teams and leagues. What is the connective tissue here that also now includes Formula One? And how has it been for you in this new field of F1 when you have a huge sporting background and a lot of other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you look across those, sports gives us that live entertainment, and so there's, there's huge value in that, and the growth in Major League Baseball or the NBA, has been incredible. We look at the success of the Dodgers, and I think so across the TWG ecosystem, that is the benchmark. Right?
The Dodgers? The Dodgers are the benchmark.
It's an incredibly high benchmark.
I live in LA, so I accept that. I'm happy.
Yeah, back-to-back World Series. And so, but again, I think what we look at in each place is, really trying to, you want to have the resources, you want to have the culture, it's attracting the talented people, both, on the field or participating in the sport, as well as, in the back office. We're just trying to build the best, teams we can. These are premier brands. So we think about the Dodgers, Lakers, Cadillac Formula One team. These are premier names in sports. And so, putting all that together is a powerful combination. And there's collaboration across, each of those teams, certainly from a commercial standpoint to say, how can a rising tide lift all boats, across that ecosystem? So
potentially you would give like the Dodgers treatment to Cadillac. Is that what you're saying? In terms of your role, your job?
Yeah. So we're trying to bring the best resources to, to build it up. Like the U.S. headquarters will be, the first class premier, F1 headquarters. We're not just trying to show up and look like every other team.
Yeah.
We want to build the Formula One team, for the next generation. And so taking the steps now to do that.
What do you think have been the things stopping an American team or an American driver up till now? Is it just about someone with a lot of money deciding I want an American team and I'm going to build it? Because it's been tried.
I think it's a tough road, right? It means like somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10, you're moving to Europe and racing in the lower series, and and spending most of your the latter part of your childhood in Europe, looking to fighting to get that chance. It's super expensive, and so without the right backing, without the right sponsor, it can be definitely a long road. I mean, there have been others in the past who have done it, so it's not like they're haven't been American drivers, but
sure.
But again, I think with what we're trying to do to bring Formula One to the U.S., not just have the U.S. go to Formula One, we want to continue to create that excitement, to develop drivers that that's young kids who want to be Formula One drivers. As an American, like I want to drive in Formula One. What do I have to do to do that? And so to create that pool of talent, because it's such an elite sport. There are so few drivers, 22 drivers that have a seat across the entire motorsport ecosystem. And so how do we make sure that young Americans have that opportunity to develop and have a chance at one of those seats?
And hopefully maybe some of the people that go to the fan zone will get a glimpse of, oh, this is accessible. I can start to see the thread that takes me toward getting involved.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the last conversation with Susie. I mean, I think it starts with sowing those seeds of belief. Mm-hmm. As a young person, do you see yourself? Do you aspire to that? Because if you don't, there's a good chance you won't get there. Sure. And so you want to create that opportunity and that belief and the inspiration to do so, to kids of a very young age, to create that possibility.
So let's talk about this season. I've seen some of your comments. You've likened building an F1 team from scratch to basically sailing a ship while you're building it, or building a ship while you're sailing it. Talk to me about, what have been the biggest surprises for you this year? What are the challenges, and what are you hoping to implement even in this race compared to previous races this season?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, complex work streams that are happening, at the same time. Building a car is no joke. Designing it, and then we're designing it without on-track data. So this is a car that's built from a computer, and so the team's done an amazing job, with that from that standpoint. And then we've got, like, even if you think of HR, so we add 50 people a month. How do you build a culture when
add 50 people a month onboarding to the team?
Yeah, so you think of so today there's around 600 employees in the organization. So at different stages across the year, you've got 10 to 30% of your, depending on what stage we're talking about, of your organization, is changing month in and month out. How do you build a culture around that? And then you want to have even like things like HR, like, just the retention and creating a place where the best of the best want to come work. That's its own challenge. There's a real estate development project. We've been hard at work building the operations in Silverstone, building the headquarters in Indianapolis and the power unit plant, in Charlotte. And when you think of the size and scale of just the real estate project alone, it's big and it's daunting. And so, assembling all those pieces, and then in the early stages, right, just like any other business, it's all hands on deck. The coffee machine shows up and it's boxed up. Who's going to unbox it? Who's going to put it out?
Are you saying you've unboxed a coffee machine, an espresso machine?
I might have.
Yeah. Someone's got to do it.
It's the fuel that keeps us going, right? And so, you start with things like that, but then the organization has to evolve. The organization has to turn into, policies, procedures, precision, all these things that happen so that you have robust process to develop these cars and compete at the highest level of sport. Like that's not done with kind of ad hoc. So it's almost like something has to evolve from, Jimmy's garage to NASA, in a very short period of time, and how do you do that while you're also producing the very goods that you're talking about? In theory, something of this scale and scope should take years and years to develop.
It has taken years for all these other teams.
Yeah,
I mean, they've got
we got our entry in March of last year.
So what is Cadillac F1 racing culture?
It's grit, right? It's our culture is, we're this underdog culture that, that's exceeding expectations. People say, you won't get the car to Barcelona, and we did. We completed all the laps there and in Bahrain. And then it's like, well, you'll get to Melbourne, but maybe it doesn't, the car doesn't move when the lights go out. It did. You won't be within the 107% of the rule for qualifying. We were well inside of that, and we're competing against other teams, and we're beating other teams even as we start. And so I think across the paddock, we've exceeded expectations of what people thought was possible. Now, having said that, I also see the perspective that was set along the way. I'm like, as I've walked through the factory, I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know just how complicated. I didn't know we had to build this. If I'd have known that back then, I would have been much more intimidated, by what we set out to do. Because it's incredibly complex, but couldn't be more proud of the work that this team has done, and even just seeing the rate of growth. Because for us right now, it's that rate of progress, for the team of how we're going to improve each week, how quickly are we catching up, to really start to race more and more teams week in and week out.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what indicators are you looking? Obviously, I don't think Cadillac is expected to win the series this year, but there are other indicators to look at that would indicate you're moving towards success. It seems like you've listed a few. Are there other things? Obviously, scoring a point would be good. What standard are you holding yourself to that let you know you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it's really just looking at the rate of progress. And the gap to the key competitors that we have mapped out in the shop.
Who are those key competitors?
Yeah, well, we'll keep that to ourselves for now.
All right.
But that's a Cadillac secret. But certainly keeping track of that and what that rate of progress is week in and week out. Just how the teams are working together, the quality of the car build. Continuing to develop the relationship with Ferrari as we're using a Ferrari power unit right now.
Yeah.
And so. All of those things are really key to improving that performance.
Yeah, and it seems like as you move forward, Cadillac is really gaining momentum with the fans, if nothing else. As you're going into this weekend, is there anything that we should all be watching that you think would indicate where Cadillac's headed in the future?
I don't know if there are external factors. I think this is really a bottoms-up approach. I think, again, we've got a great group of partners and VIP guests that are coming in. We've got community-building events, as we're looking across. People just, a few blocks away in Jungle Plaza that'll be able to watch qualifying, and the race, in a Cadillac fan zone this weekend. And so all of those things, certainly point towards building up the fan base. We've got a special livery. We designed a special livery that is still within the black and white scheme, but it pays homage to the Stars and Stripes.
Oh, very cool.
But at the same time, we're a brand new team. So we didn't want to have a livery that's such a departure that people for the first time aren't seeing what our car really looks like. And so this was a clever way to blend the two together.
Okay, so last question as we close down. What does this mean for you on a personal level? Just to be here, it's already been a long journey, you said, from when you started and now you're here. Can you just give us some reflections on what it means to be here and what this weekend specifically will mean for you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, this first race on U.S. soil is incredibly meaningful. This was a dream that started over 4 years ago to get into Formula One. It was a long road. There were many days where it didn't look like it was even possible, and all we heard was no, and we had to turn the no into not yet and build and build and build. And so to finally be here, but it's not a destination. The goal wasn't to get to Miami. It's really just the beginning of what we plan to do. But to be able to plant the flag here in Miami for our first U.S. race, the Miami race is so spectacular. And so to be able to do that here, it's incredibly meaningful, and this is a big, big weekend for Cadillac Formula One.
Well, we're so happy that you chose to spend some time with us today. Thank you, Dan Towriss. And that was Dan Towriss, team principal of Cadillac F1, and really kind of the guy trying to build a motorsport empire. This is his goal.
Great to hear so many American teams and new entrants in F1.
That does it for this week's show. Remember to follow and subscribe to Hot Pursuit on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen. You can also send us your comments. Email us at hotpursuit@bloomberg.net.
Yes, and by the way, check out Hannah's columns and stories on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. Go there for car reviews, events, and stories that you won't find anywhere else. Find it all at Bloomberg.com/pursuit/autos. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott. We'll be back in your podcast feed again next week.